Review time, partner.
And watch the Charlie Hebdo shooting hoax expose documentary to get the foundation so you can understand what the heck is going on here. Once you watch that video, you're going to see everything all laid out. They're going to tell you what they want to do.
As many of the terror victims are laid to rest and mourn today, one of the big questions, why did security fail so spectacularly this time? In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister David Cameron wants new laws to break into terrorist communications online, after the head of MI5 warned last week that mass casualty attacks are certainly being planned against the West. Joining me live now from Brussels is the EU anti-terror coordinator, Gilles de Kerkhoff. Welcome and thanks for joining me this evening. You have been in Paris. There was a summit of all sorts of anti-terror chiefs from around Europe and the United States. This mobilization that we've seen, these dramatic scenes, the mourning and the pledges to do better, can you do better?
Indeed, and beside the tragic event, you mentioned rightly that it was a sort of game changer in two respects. First, a very strong political will by Minister of Interior of 12 member states, the US Attorney General, the number 2 of DHS, as well as the Canadian Minister, and the Commissioner for Home Affairs in Europe. And this is important because we have to crystallize and build on this very strong political will to go ahead. The second aspect, which makes me rather optimistic, is the huge reaction of civil society. We've never had that before. We've had some sort of campaign with "not in my name" of that sort, but never on that scale. Having people from different faiths, religion, nationalities standing together to defend values.
Exactly what I said in the documentary.
Let me ask you directly, because you mentioned political will and striking while the iron is hot, so to speak. The Prime Minister of Great Britain, David Cameron, has said that if a Tory government is elected in again, as a matter of priority, he will try to deny terrorists and would-be terrorists any online space for communication.
Like banning Snapchat.
What exactly does that mean? And do you think there's the will to yet again tackle this tricky task of basically surveilling and spying on people's communications?
I haven't heard nor read what the British Prime Minister said. If he mentioned something about the need to get access and be able to intercept some telecommunication, which is more and more difficult because of the policy of the big companies, Google, Microsoft, as a consequence of the Snowden leak, and they encrypt more and more telecommunication.
People don't want
that. It is a very valid point. And to be honest, this is a point that I made myself at the meeting of the minister. But I'm sure, and when you follow the British politics and the way they address terrorism, it's much more subtle and much more balanced. It covers a very wide range of policy from prevent to respond. And that's what we try to do in Europe. It's not one single issue like interception. Of course we need more interception, we need more data, but we need to work on the root causes of radicalization, address them.
You know, this all comes in the wake or around a speech that the head of domestic intelligence here, the MI5 chief, warning just, practically the day of the Paris attacks, that already scores of Syria-related mass casualty attacks have been averted, but they most definitely are planning more, and it's very likely that it will happen. What are you fast-tracking now when you look at urgent requirements right now in intelligence and security?
As you rightly pointed out, Andrew Parker does not speak often, so if he says something, it is to be listened to very seriously. And there is indeed still a threat, a serious threat, and it comes from Syria and Iraq. And that's why we've been working the last 2 years very hard to define more effective policy. It's about external border control, improving the check at the external border, because we have to detect and stop would-be jihadists much more effectively. It's about aviation security. It's also maximizing the instrument that we have developed over the years, like Europol, like the Schengen Information System, and it's also investing more on prevent. As I've said before, if you look at the recent case in France,
it's all about control. This is all fluff, what he's saying.
Who killed 5 Jews in Brussels, or 4 Jews in Brussels, and Noel Koulibaly. All these 3 people have been got radicalized in prison. So prison
fake
remains,
picture.
sadly, a major incubator of radicalization. And finally, internet. We've started
There you
dialogue
go.
with the big companies, Google, Twitter,
War
Facebook.
on the internet.
Because it's a Twitter war. It's something we have to
Twitter
address,
war.
both by removing illegal content.
Fake videos.
It's
Look.
difficult because there is always the challenge of freedom of speech.
What you mean,
and on
a
the other
challenge,
hand, you have
Joker?
to use internet proactively to counter the single
You don't
narrative
regulate
of Al-Qaeda,
internet.
of Daesh, and send counter messages.
No.
What about freedom of movement? Obviously, there's a huge amount of,
She's so into the agenda.
talk about how this woman, Hayat Boumediene, was able to get from France to Turkey.
Look, ugly weird.
You know, watched as she's busy shopping, and then a few days later, after spending a few days in Turkey, manages to get across Syria. There's obviously a big
Look at that
battle
fake
over
picture
this
right there with
between
that-
the Turkish authorities and European authorities. But how on earth could that
Propaganda.
happen?
Here we go.
I
at
would
that.
say because we are missing one instrument, and that's at the core of the
Look.
discussion in Paris. We really need to do what the Americans have done after 9/11 to
There you
set
go.
what they call a passenger name record,
There you go.
PNR, which is one of the few tools
French is 9/11.
which allows the police to detect suspicious travel when their services have not been able, based on intelligence, to detect that someone was planning to go abroad for the jihad. And this is a very difficult issue because it raises concern of privacy.
But that's why
and
you did the
European
fake
Parliament,
event,
for the
though.
time being, is a bit reluctant. So part of the work now is try to convince the European Parliament that it's very much needed.
Red Silver J. All I gotta say.